Real quick, my name is Clark Adams. I'm in the Applications and Records section, and I'll work with our public inquiry. And I know when you guys saw the agenda for this, you all saw they're going to be talking about water use groups, so I want to go. It's everyone's favorite topic, and it's always so clear and easy to follow. You've probably heard, yep, I've already broke it. Okay, I was pushing it looked like the forward button, but it's really the back button. Okay. You probably heard some of these terms. Supplemental rights, supplemental groups, water use groups. And, you know, are they the same? Are they different? And hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll be able to tell some of the differences. First, we'll kind of talk about supplemental rights. And usually, it's the nature if you're having a water right that's based on a surface.
For those of us still trying to flip around the book and find it, I believe it's on page 60.
Okay.
It's not in order.
Okay. If you heard that, it's start on page 60, or whatever one interests you the most. If you have a water right that's based on a surface right, usually the nature of those is they don't work the full year. Early in the irrigation season, they'll probably provide a full supply to cover your beneficial use. And in this case, we're talking about irrigation. As the season progresses, the flows may diminish out of the surface source, and the amount of available water gets less. And we've had applications filed with our office to drill wells to supplement these surface sources so they can make up for the diminished flows from the surface source. And as it gets further along in the irrigation season, the surface source can continue to dry up, and they still want to irrigate the same number of acres, so they've had to pump more water from the well. And then late in the irrigation season, the well could become the only source of water for this use. And sometimes then we'd have two or sometimes more water rights that are used for the same beneficial use. However, these supplemental water rights can only divert up to the duty from all the water rights for the required beneficial use. So, okay. Why do we group them together? We can group water rights together based on several attributes of the water rights: common place of use, a period of use, or the type of use. The type of use is commonly referred to as the beneficial use. So here's a quick question: if there are two or more water rights that share the same point of diversion, should they be in the same water use group? Not necessarily. Okay. All right. So, what is a water use group? It's a means for our office to organize our records. The official water right record are our physical or paper files that we have for each water right, and water rights are grouped together in our water rights database, usually based on the common use of the water. But as you're trying to determine or figure out the water uses, we encourage you to use the paper file to get a full picture and the database to get a full picture of the water right record. All water rights have a use, and each water right has at least one water use group that is part of. But a water right can belong to more than one water use group. Each group portrays a unique set of water rights, and each water use group portrays a water right or a group of water rights for specific beneficial use, and tries to identify what water rights are used on that ground. Okay. A specific water use group will define the place of use, the period of use, and the beneficial uses of that group, of the water right or the water rights that are within that group. Water use groups can contain one water right, or they can contain hundreds. In relation to points of diversion, usually water use groups are not structured based on points of diversion. A water use group may include one point of diversion or it could contain numerous, like each water right in the group, each pointed version is listed there, and I'll give you an example of that in a little bit. So is this statement true? An individual water right can belong to more than one water use group. Yes, they can be parts of numerous. Okay, each water use group is identified by a group number. If you haven't figured that out, we like to assign numbers to everything. In this case, the group number is 628294. Don't want to throw you off already. And you can search by that group number and determine which water rights are associated with it. And let me just talk real quickly about some of the information that the water use group will define. The first one is the place of use. The place of use is basically where the water right is used. It is the authorized place of use for the water rights within the group, and it should be consistent with our water right records. The places of use are described by 40-acre tracts. This is a portion of a specific water right, and in this case, this water right is used in the northeast quarter of the southwest quarter of Section 32, Township 32, Section 32, Township 36 South, Range 13 West. And if you see there, you see the 0.25. This water is used for a quarter acre of irrigation, and it's a quarter acre of irrigation somewhere in that 40-acre tract. Okay, the water use group will also define the period of use, which is the time interval during the year in which water can be applied for use in that group. The period of use will vary depending on the use. Some uses are year-round, like a domestic use or stock watering. Irrigation will usually will cover during the irrigation season for that part of the state you're in, and that will vary depending on where you're at in the state. You may have high elevation that you only can irrigate from June to August, or you may be down in St. George where you can irrigate year-round. In this case, the period of use is listed right there, and it's for the irrigation, and it's from April 1st to October 31st of each year. Another attribute or information that you can find out of the water use group is the beneficial use, which is the beneficial use is the purpose to which water is diverted under a water right and is applied for specific use. For irrigation, beneficial use is measured in acres, or the number of acres that will be irrigated under a group. For domestic and stock watering, it is measured in the number of homes or the number of livestock units. And in this case, this water right is limited to the irrigation of a quarter acre of irrigation. If you haven't heard this 10 times today, you will. So your beneficial use is the basis, the measure, and the limit of a water right. And here's some of the more common types of beneficial use that you'll find in our database: irrigation, stock water, and domestic, mining, municipal, power generation. We also have an other category which brings in other things like commercial, recreation, oil exploration, wildlife, and yes, you can have an other water use. So if we can't fit into a category, we'll do it in a catch-all other. Some terms to understand, you've probably heard these a little bit today. Sole supply is the amount of beneficial use allowed under a particular water right. But we can also express it for a water use group, and the sole supply for an entire group is the amount of beneficial use used for that group of water rights. And this can also be called the group total. Beneficial use amounts is how much an individual water right contributes to a water use group, and also can be called a group contribution. So why do we use groups? Why do I use a broken, okay. We use the groups to kind of account for the limits and measure of each of the water rights. And the water use group becomes an index to the water rights that serve a use. And if we identify a specific parcel of ground, the water use group can help identify which water rights are used on that parcel. And we try to use water use groups to have some kind of understanding of all the unique uses that are occurring throughout the state. So how will you interact with water use groups? It should show you a value for each water right in a group. The group may reflect more use than an individual water right in a group, and I'll give you an example of that coming up. Care should be taken to understand the sole supply or limits of a water right that is being acquired. So if you're buying a water right, you probably want to try to understand what you're buying. If the water right, if you look at the group and it says it's irrigating 800 acres, but you didn't notice that the sole supply is 10 acres, and you think you're buying 800 acres of water, you're probably going to be pretty disappointed. In filing a change application, only the limits of the individual water rights can be changed, not the entire group. If you're not filing a change application on the entire group of water rights. If a sole supply has not been established for a water right in a group, it will need to be done prior to filing the application. And we'll talk a little bit more about establishing these sole supplies. And if you're confused or can't find the information, the best advice I can give you is come in and talk to us. We'll be happy to sit down with you, look at the water right records, see what we have in the database that we have on the physical file. And when a water right is quantified, the limits identified in that quantification become the limits of that water right. So let's go over some examples on how these things look in our database. Here we have water use group 63, 67, 68. It's based on 2 water rights, 51, 48, 50, 59, and 51, 86, 25. The top water right, 51, 48, 59, if you see it circled, is limited to the irrigation of 13.62 acres. The other water right, 51, 86, 25, is limited to 1.25 acres. These are the sole supplies for each of the water rights, or how much each water right contributes to the group total. And again, that's also can be called the group contribution. So the group total, between the total that these 2 water rights can irrigate together is 14.87 acres. And this total is shown on both water rights and should be consistent in our database. So this is the maximum amount of irrigation or beneficial use that these 2 water rights can do together. Okay, let's look at a little more exciting example, if water use groups can be exciting. Group number 60013. This water right is based on 12 different water rights, and this group of water rights is used for irrigation. And if you'll note that water right 71229 has a sole supply beneficial use of 20 acres. So that's how much this 71229 contributes to this group. And in this case, each of the 12 other water rights in this group has its own sole supply. The group total, which is the sum of all the sole supplies for the 12 water rights, is 755.98 acres. And I don't know why they couldn't just get that 0.02 acres to get an evil 756, but they didn't quite make it. So the group also shows the place of use. And again, the numbers within each of those 40 acre tracts is the number of acres within that 40 acres. And some of them you'll see are more than 40 acres. That means it's an odd size section. And then if you notice at the top, let's see if I can get this mouse to work, you'll see a link that says View Map. And you'll see that several places in our water rights database. If you click on that, it'll take you to this. And this shows you what the water use group looks like. The area highlighted in green is the approved or certificated place of use for all the water rights within the group. And the little red squares are the well locations, or the points of diversions that are used to make up this total irrigation. And just for kind of a quick example how these water rights are interrelated, I'm just going to show you how we make up this place of use. So if you'll notice, there's And this is just an example. This is not the exact, please don't use this for transferring title or anything. We just kind of pulled the numbers together. This is where the 20 acres for 71229 is used. That's the 20 acres it is pertinent to. And then as we add more water rights, you can see where they're used. And then we add a few more, and a few more, to the point where it is almost all covered, okay? And then we notice here, we still have some acreage that is listed as the place of use that is not covered by a sole supply of a water right. So why do we have this? See, there's the question. Okay, if we go back to the group structure, we see a group total of 755.98 acres, which is the total sole supply of all the water rights within the group. But there, down at the bottom, you'll see it has a group acreage total, which is the total acreage that is being irrigated, and that says 884 acres. So why is there a difference? So at face value, it looks like they are short 127 acres. And this is where you get into the records of the water rights and figure out why is there a difference, and how am I buying 883 acres of irrigation, or am I buying 755? So the difference, as we dig into this particular case, these water rights were certificated in the 1970s with this difference. It was said you can irrigate up to 884 acres, but you only have water rights for 755, and this was allowed so they could do a crop rotation. So each year they had to identify where 127 acres of irrigation was not going to be irrigated and is going to be left fallow. But if you look closely at the aerial photography, it doesn't look like there's anything fallow when that picture was taken. And as things progressed, they wanted to maximize their profit, so they found water rights that they could lease, and they filed temporary change applications each year so they could irrigate the full 883, but they only had water rights that they owned as part of this group for 755. But recently, the owners have purchased additional water rights, and they have filed permanent applications to cover all their acreage. And when they file proof and certificate their water rights, those additional water rights will be added to this group, and it'll show that they can irrigate a total of 884 acres. And this kind of shows that these water use groups can be dynamic and change over time. Okay. What about municipalities and public water suppliers? We have a group here, 4118780. This is the beneficial use. Okay, the beneficial use is for municipal use within Salt Lake City, and if you'll note at the bottom, there's a note that says that this water right has a sole supply of 148.5 acre feet of water to the group total. And then all these water rights, these are all the water rights in the water use group used for Salt Lake City. For most municipalities and public water suppliers, all the water rights used within their service area are included in one water use group. And not all water, and sometimes they'll cross drainage basins, but if you're really interested, each one of these water rights is hyperlinked, and you can click on it and find out all the information you want, and it'll take you right to it. So again, for municipalities, the water use group will include all water rights within the service area. Okay. As you get into trying to dissect and understand a water use group, there are different sources you can go to. Most of these can be found on our database or on the physical paper file. And if you're trying to determine what the value of each water right in the group is, you can look at the original application appropriate, what established that water right. If there was a diligence claim, an underground water claim files, look at certificates, judicial decrees, if there's been through an adjudication in the area, hopefully there's been a published proposed determination. There's maps and hydrographic survey maps that would be available. These and other records will help clarify the value or limitations of the water rights within a group. Okay. What do you do if you find a group that has private water rights, and then you also notice it has water rights listed from an irrigation company? So at some time in the past, shares of stock were probably used on that same parcel of ground to irrigate a portion of that land with private rights and with shares from a company. Shares of stock in an irrigation company can be moved around within the company's service area and are not necessarily pertinent or tied to a particular parcel of ground. So if you see in our database that there is water rights in an irrigation company listed in a water use group, that's an error. We have tried to separate those, separate the company rights from the private rights. And what you'll see today is we have a note on there that basically stating that in addition to the water rights in the group, that water has been supplied to the same place of use by an irrigation company. Okay. We hate to admit this, but the water use groups and the information in our database may not be 100% correct. Our office has gone through several iterations of how to portray water use group data. And this has sometimes caused duplicate records to be created or data entry errors have crept in. We have duplicate groups, incomplete groups, and as you're researching the records and believe that the water use group does not accurately reflect the limitations of the water right or does not include all the water rights or for any other reason, send us a written request. Explain why you think our records are wrong, and why it should be corrected and modified. As you are researching the records and something doesn't make sense, please, again, feel free to come in and talk to us. We'll be happy to sit down with you and review these records. And sometimes we just do our best to try to fix these errors. Let me just look at another quick example. Water use group 40864. This group is based on 4 water rights. It is used for irrigation, for the irrigation of 18 acres. But then if you look at the beneficial use, it says the acres have been unevaluated. So how do you evaluate an unevaluated group? And I think this is, if you take anything away, this is the meat of why you're here. And I know I'm so excited to be here. We do have administrative rules that governs how we declare beneficial uses within a group, or how we quantify the water rights within a group. The first one would be a written request explaining why it should be corrected, what needs to be corrected, and why you think or know our records are wrong or incomplete. And I think Jim was going to talk about a new feature. We have a feedback tab. Okay, I won't steal your thunder. And in a minute, we're going to go over a little bit more detail the last two, which are declaration of beneficial use and then an application for apportionment of beneficial use. And both these forms are found on our website. Okay? But let's ask the question that everyone is just trying to scream out. Why do we need to define the water rights in a water use group? Uses in a group need to be defined or evaluated before a segregation or a change application is done or filed on a water right that is part of a group with other water rights. Okay, looks like it's about time to get started again. So where we were right before we got evacuated is why do water groups need to be defined? And just as a quick reminder, we had a group that was defined as 18 acres, but the individual water rights were not within that group. So we wanted to define those individual water rights. So if you wanted to pull out one of those water rights and file a change application on it, you would need to define the value of that water right and define the value of the other water rights in that entire group. So it has to be done before the segregation is filed and before the change application is filed. If a water right is to be separated from a group or other water rights, the rights need to be properly defined so there will not be any confusion if the rights in the group are to be used independently of each other sometime in the future. So we talked about defining the unevaluated groups. The first option would be, again, just to write us a letter, say, hey, fix this. The second one would be filing what's called a Declaration of Beneficial Use. In that, you will define the sole supplies for some or all the water rights within the group. And if you want to, you can define a water right to have zero sole supply. It could be, that would be considered an auxiliary water right with no associated beneficial use. It was just, you could use that source to supplement the entire group. Many times when there are multiple water rights in a group, there are more than one owner that you're having to deal with, and that may be affected by filing this declaration. Each owner of the water rights in the water use group must sign the Declaration of Beneficial Use. This tells us that they agree with the quantification or the proposed quantification of the water rights. And if all the owners do not sign, we cannot process the declaration. Once the declaration has been completed and signed, it will be submitted to our office for review. And if everything is in order, we'll modify the water right records as requested by the owners in the declaration. Okay. The last method, and probably the more complicated one, is filing what's called an application for apportionment of beneficial use. Usually you should try to begin by doing a declaration rather than an apportionment. But there may be owners who do not agree with the proposed quantification and refuse to sign the declaration. Or there may be title issues where one of the owners has passed away, or they can't get the title transferred into their name because for some reason or another. If you can't get all the owners to sign the declaration, then the next step would be filing an apportionment request. Basically, an apportionment is requesting our office to review the information and make a recommendation how these water rights should be quantified within the group. This can be a lengthy process. Basically what we will do, we'll attempt to contact every owner of the water rights in the group and gather their information on how they believe the water rights should be quantified and evaluated. Then we'll review the water right records along with the information provided, and we'll try to make a determination how to apportion the beneficial use amongst the various water rights in that group. We will then notify all the parties of our apportionment recommendation and then give everyone an opportunity to comment on how we got it wrong. So the best thing you can do is to try to work with the other owners within the group and come to an agreement amongst yourselves on how the water rights should be divided and quantified. And if there's just one thing I'm going to hit on again, one thing I want you to take away from this is if you're working through water use groups, they can be complicated. And if you don't know where to go, come in and talk to us. We'll be happy to sit down with you here in our Salt Lake office, where we've got 5 outside regional offices that are happy to help, and we can review the water right records. And our technical services staff has done a really good job of getting all our water right records scanned and available for everyone to view. But you're welcome to come review the physical file. I cannot imagine that after that all-encompassing presentation that anyone would have any questions after that. But if there are, now's the time. Any questions or anything needs to be clarified?
You said if we had a problem, we can come in and talk to you.
Yes.
Would that be just walk in or make an appointment?
You could do either one. If it's going to be complicated and you feel like it's going to take a lot of time, call ahead, make an appointment. We can, if it would be better served that you meet with someone in the regional office or someone in our public inquiry section, we can at least get you started and get you going in the right direction.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm glad it looks like I covered everything, so I appreciate your time and good luck tomorrow on the test. Thanks.